On behalf of the Collegiate Entrepreneurs Organization, this is National Growth and Programs Manager Michael Lukes, joined here by Elizabeth Presson, CEO and founder of Working Remotely. Elizabeth, thanks a lot for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and Working Remotely.
Sure. Well, I kind of by default started working in startups the first day of my career. And really, like I said, it was by default. It was by necessity and not by choice. I had finished up an internship I had moved to Washington, D.C. for, and living in D.C. as a young college graduate, I needed to start making some money. And even though I'd always pictured myself kind of climbing a corporate ladder, I started working at a really small agency. And my first day of work at that agency, the founder called me into his office and he said, do you want to do something different, something bigger than this? And when I said yes, it turned into me being the first employee of a social media startup, a social media management system called GoSo. And it just so happened that about 6 months later, Edelman, which is a fairly huge PR firm that was really my dream job, they actually reached out to me. And when I walked into their building, when the elevator doors opened on their floor of their building in D.C., I just instantly realized that my whole entire set of dreams had changed. And that was the moment that I realized that I didn't need to climb a corporate ladder to become a CEO, and I didn't have to wait for what I wanted and impress a bunch of people at this huge organization. I could do what I wanted right then and there. So, not just becoming the own CEO of my business, but the CEO of my own life. And that's my whole reason for starting Working Remotely. Working Remotely is about not just working from a different place, but it's working from a different mindset. And it's a mindset of freedom. Freedom from, bosses, if that's what you want, or freedom from location. Really just making your own rules.
Even though it kind of came from default, have you had an entrepreneurial background? Did you consider yourself entrepreneurial in any way?
Sure, yeah. I think that I've always been an entrepreneur, but I wasn't exactly recognizing it as being an entrepreneur. I recognized it as just wanting more. I talked a little bit about freedom and a little bit about, just having a desire to not have to, answer to people would be the right word. So I've always had that in some way or another, and I've always tried to start things. I've always seen that leadership quality in myself, and I've always recognized that there's something different. But what I realize now is that it's just that entrepreneurial spirit.
So the actual creation of Working Remotely, did it kind of happen through that first work experience where you were working with that social media startup, or did it kind of develop in a different way?
Sure, yeah. I think that the idea initially, or the manifestation of the idea did start then. It was a shift in my whole thinking up until that point. So, before then I had been very set on what I thought I wanted out of life, and everything changed in that moment. So after I worked at that startup, I moved on to work with other startups, even really large organizations. And through that other work, I mentioned always wanting more. I felt like I always wanted more until I actually had the opportunity to have complete office freedom, complete freedom from, all of the constraints of a 9-to-5, quote, 9-to-5 regular job. And that's when the idea really, when the actual website was actually built and I actually started creating content around the Working Remotely concept.
You'll be speaking at the 2013 CEO National Conference in Chicago this October to college students and young entrepreneurs. What will you be speaking about?
So, like I said, I've had a couple of different experiences. I've worked as a contractor, I've worked as a freelancer, as an entrepreneur, and I've had my own business. And I think I have one simple message, and it's that we're all fighting for the same thing, and it's freedom. And the way that we can get our freedom the easiest is really just by becoming the CEOs of our own lives. So if we want to be an entrepreneur, we can do it in tons of different ways. We don't have to wait till we're ready to start our own business. And that might not be the path that's right for most people. So I'm going to look at those different aspects of being an entrepreneur and help people understand what the right next step is. So young people, maybe going off and starting day one a brand new business before you have any other work experience isn't right. Maybe it is right for some people, but I want to talk about no matter where you're at or where you're going, you can start being an entrepreneur today.
So following off of that last point you made, is there a way that, a young individual can tell if that it's right for them to be an entrepreneur, or does it really depend on the opportunities available, or how can someone notice, if it might be a good idea for them to become an entrepreneur?
Sure. Well, I guess I think of entrepreneurship as much more of a mindset, but I always suggest to try freelance work, and I think that that's kind of dipping your toes into the water, seeing what it's like to manage your own time, to manage your own clients, and to really just be the one in the place to make decisions. So if you're confused, or if you're just thinking about it, or if you're wondering if it's right for you, that's what I always suggest to people. Try it, even if you want to have a full-time job, and try it on the side. There's nothing wrong with kind of dipping your toes in the water before jumping in.
Great. A large part of your work is with corporations to assist them with communications and community building. How do you assist them with both those aspects, the community building and communication?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Well, the first thing that I want to point out is, working remotely started out as a resource for remote workers. But in talking about working remotely and kind of the beliefs behind it, it's more than just a place. I've realized that business leaders and organizations need help understanding this whole new mindset. So whether it's working remotely, whether it's, bring your own device, or just understanding new motivations of the world's greatest assets, which are a new generation of employees, I've realized that business leaders need help with this too. So that's a big part of what we do at Working Remotely, and a big part of what I've done in my personal work in the past. And really that focuses on one thing, and that one thing is advocacy. And so what I do for organizations is help them build internal and external advocacy. So I have a framework with Working Remotely where we go in and we actually teach organizations this framework to help them identify the right people inside and out. So figure out who already loves your business, or who already has a great personal brand that your business isn't leveraging that might already work for you. And then find more people like them and figure out what makes them tick. And then use personal communication to reach out and foster relationships with those people to learn more about your business internally and find more like-minded people to do business with externally.
Let's talk a little bit more about working remotely. What are some of the advantages and disadvantages for employees working remotely?
Sure. I mentioned this line before, but I think it really rings true here. As humans, we're all fighting for the same thing, and that thing is freedom. And when our employers are the people who give us freedom, who make us feel completely free, we have this whole new outlook on work, or at least that's what I've experienced, and that's what the people I've talked to have experienced. It really turns into wanting to give back to an organization and continuously on a daily basis show our proof of value, because we're no longer just sitting at a desk to say, I'm here, I've showed up today, but we're actually delivering things and saying, this is the value I bring to the organization. And it becomes based on appreciation and value provided versus just time spent to bring home a paycheck. So I think that that's the biggest advantage. It's the biggest advantage for employees, and it's the biggest advantage for businesses as well.
And what about some of the disadvantages of working remotely for an employee?
Sure, absolutely. There was a great Fast Company article that was it went through on working remotely. If anyone wants to read it, we curated the article, but it's about a gentleman who went through a 9-month transition period from working in an office every day to building his own home office. And really it wasn't just about the logistical stuff, because what he realized is that he completely created a room that mocked exactly what he would have in an office inside of an organization. And he noticed that it wasn't the stuff. It was just a different mindset that he was in. And he was forcing himself for a long time not to go upstairs and talk to his wife on a break. And after the 9 months were over, after he had went through that transitional period, he had realized that that doesn't make sense. If I want to go upstairs and have lunch with my wife for an hour or take a walk for an hour, I'm maybe better suited to make up that time on a Saturday. Or maybe I'll be in a more productive mood later at night. And I think that that's something that people don't expect, is that it's not just a change in location, but it's a change in the way we completely live our lives. So while that can start out as a disadvantage because it's very confusing, it takes a lot of time. Like I said, for this guy it was 9 months. It takes some time to figure out. It turns into an advantage. It's a different lifestyle, though, so it takes a lot of time to get used to.
And then from the company side, and this is something you work with a lot with those corporations, what are some of the advantages and disadvantages of having employees that are working remotely?
Sure, absolutely. So an advantage is what I had mentioned before, is that your employees are just happier. They respect their jobs more, and they feel more compelled to prove their value. And on the negative side, and I don't really think it's a negative, it's another negative kind of turn into a positive, but, it can make managers feel very out of control to have their employees work off-site. It's natural, I think. We want to see people in the office. We want to walk to somebody's cubicle and make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do or have a conversation. Such a natural thing. But as a business leader, I've seen that, if managers feel like they're out of control by not seeing people in the office, if it doesn't work for them because they can't physically see what their employees are doing, we have more of an underlying problem. We have a problem where we're basing value on time spent versus value actually delivered. So it's a problem with the way we're measuring performance and the way we're motivating productivity, and not so much a problem of control or perceived control in this case.
And then finishing up here, what advice do you have for current and aspiring young entrepreneurs from your experience?
Sure. My number one piece of advice is to start today. People are planning their escapes. We see this through so many different websites online. We see it through books. Plan the escape from your 9 to 5, 4-hour work week, choose yourself. All of those things are great. But my message is that you don't need to plan to be an entrepreneur. You can decide that that's what you want to do today, and you can start. If that means being in a 9 to 5 and positioning yourself as an entrepreneur, if it means working as a freelancer and just controlling your own time and the habitat in which you work, or if it means starting a completely new business, just take that first step today. First change your mindset, and then the rest will come along.
Great, and this has been Michael Lukes from CEO with Elizabeth Presson from Working Remotely. Elizabeth, thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you in Chicago late October.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I appreciate it.